Greetings, one and all. This is a much anticipated review that I've been wanting to do for some time, ever since I heard about this film, Puss in Boots. Unfortunately, circumstances just made it a little difficult for me to be able to actually view it within a timely manner, and so now I'm actually seeing it far after the time of it being in the box office and whatnot, but I think it might have been helpful in the long run. Recently, I've been seeing that Puss in Boots has made an incredible run, which is quite contrary to the original reviews that I was getting a couple of months ago. And so it gives me a little bit of time, so to speak, to kind of look at where the film has been and kind of get a better scope of what its impact was. For those who are joining us, please remember that you are my eyes and ears. If you see something that is bugging out, if there's some sort of audio problem or visual problem, be sure to mention it and we will try and get it addressed as quickly as possible. We are streaming right now to two platforms, one to Twitch and one to YouTube. And right now it would be preferred if you are on the YouTube side, but the Twitch is a backup because I know not everybody is ready to kind of go over to that area. So understand, we'll keep going with the two different locations for the time being. We already have a couple folks here. Thank you for showing up. We have Hod, Jess, and Jared. And with me is Rolling Chairs to help discuss this. How you doing, Rolling Chairs?
Well, hello. Looking forward to this discussion.
I understand this has been a very important film to you. It's one that you've had a passion about for some time. You've been telling me to go out and see it for a long time, and finally went out and did it. And it's probably you were probably over there like chewing your nails off, just waiting for me to finally get that job done. But
I love this movie. It's been one of my favorite movies in a long time, to be honest.
I got to say, I was dumbfounded by what the film was. I thought it could have. There's very little there that I even anticipated happening in that film. It is rare for a film to have so many unique plot points, and it's only possible because of the sequel number that it's at. No, not Puss in Boots 2. And we will get into that later on, but based upon where it stands in terms of the franchise, I think that this was only possible based upon where it is now. But we will come to that towards the end.
This movie, it had no reason to be as good as it was. It's a sequel to a spin-off to the Shrek series and they haven't even done anything with it in 10 years, and they just completely revived it very well. I think we're going to continue to get more content like this, especially based off the last scene that we got in the movie. But this movie had no reason being as good as it was. It was a complete surprise to many people, not just me.
Oh yeah. And that goes into something interesting about when I was first getting even aware that this film existed. The reviews were not promising. Initially, there was people saying, "Oh, it's a cute film," but I knew a lot of places that were saying this film is proof that we don't need sequels. And after seeing it, it's like, no, this is exactly the reason why we need sequels. But here's the basically what happened when this film first came out. When it came out, it was being drowned out by all the other stuff coming out, and I just zoned out. I was like, I am tired of Hollywood giving us dribble and promising us good sequels and it not happening. And so I honestly didn't want to see it. I was burned so much by the sequels I had seen earlier last year that I just thought, no, not wasting my money. This is not a world that I'm too connected with. I've never been a fan of the Shrek universe. And so to me, to see a film about a universe that I'm not entirely passionate about in a year where all the sequels are basically being letdowns, there was no desire to see it. But then when the film came out, it became even more of a, well, it pushed me away even more because the people that were seeing it were not giving it good reviews. Again, it was like mixed, but it started to get a little bit better. And then around that time, the internet suddenly exploded with
Hmm.
fan art of this stuff. And I thought, okay, something is going on. That this film is obviously connecting with somebody. And even though I'm not connected with it, something about it has made people really like this story. And I thought maybe it was the Encanto effect of where a film goes to theater, it doesn't do well, they release it uh, on a home release, and suddenly it does well. I didn't
Yeah,
necessarily like Encanto, and so I thought, well, maybe it's the same thing. It's hitting a niche market,
mhm.
and I'm just not in it. Then when I
Yeah, the
saw
movie.
it, sorry, just saying. Then when I saw it, my whole perception of it changed, and I realized that there's something else at play. And we'll dive into more about what I think that is towards the tail end. You were saying rolling chairs.
Yeah, the movie, it had a very tough start. Like they released it and it didn't do super well at the box office. And then on YouTube, uh, DreamWorks posted the first 10 minutes of the movie, which like includes the whole song and dance, the sword fight, and then fighting the giant. And everyone was like, "Whoa!" Like this, just on the basic first 10 minutes, everyone was like, "This is not what I was expecting at all from Puss in Boots." And then I think that got people interested in it, and then it kind of had a good run after. Like it didn't have like most movies nowadays, they do good for like the first week or two, and then it slowly starts to teeter off. This one, it started off weak, and then it had a huge jump after a few weeks, just because uh, people were willing to give it a chance. This movie has had a very interesting run at the box office.
That it did. What you mentioned about the opening scene, that's actually interesting because, by the way, the you trying to find imagery for this film online is really hard, which is kind of strange. Normally, it's a lot easier, and I don't have any imagery I was able to get like manually. You mentioned the
Hmm.
first scene of the song and dance in the giant. Well, if I had seen that sequence, I wouldn't have wanted to see it because I would have thought, "Oh, great, we have a generic monster attack." We kind of went over that thing with the Mandalorian, actually, of
Hmm.
where there are so many films that or series that rely upon this generic monster fight, and I thought, "Oh, great, this is going to be how they lead things off." And what I feel like is that it's a bait and switch. They're trying to give you basically the same sort of concept of like the previous film where there was the giant goose monster,
Hmm.
and I started getting vibes of that, and so I did not like the first Puss in Boots movie. I thought it was entertaining, but I didn't like it, and so to see another giant monster creature that's coming in to attack to attack the village, and Puss in Boots having to help save the day, didn't give me any hope for actually seeing a good film. And had it
Hmm.
maintained this direction, I think it would have been an absolute failure. But it didn't. And I can't help but think that maybe that whole opening sequence was a trick in order to get the fans who liked the first one in. But they didn't really give a whole lot for people who were basically like me, who were not fans because we couldn't
Yeah.
stand the origins. And so because the origins were so were so strange and I just never had that connection. And so I never quite saw the potential of Puss in Boots because I
Yeah.
thought it was just a generic side character who goes on quests. I didn't think that maybe, just maybe, it was going to be different.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about the whole giant thing. And I don't think the giant was necessarily the appeal for the people who saw it. I think they were impressed by like I think many people liked the animation style of it. Like some people were commenting at the time that was like, "Whoa, this literally looks like some of the animes I like," or kind of like an Into the Spider-Verse animation vibe. And yeah, I think people were more impressed by like how the animation was rather than the giant itself. But I get what you're saying.
Word of mouth changes everything, and
Yep.
the unfortunately the word of mouth did not spread for this until much much later,
Hmm.
and that's where it gets all the more intriguing to me because the film just got more and more successful as time went on.
Hmm.
And the box office, which promised failure basically from the start, ended up basically showing that it was a wildly successful film, being considered for best animated film of the year, which honestly I can get behind.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't, I feel like they were robbed. And I don't know what they could have done to kind of change that other than advertise a little bit differently.
Hmm.
What were
Yeah.
when you first heard about this film? What were your thoughts?
Um, I mean, kind of like what you were saying earlier, you kind of were like a little burnt out with like Hollywood. I was kind of the same. I didn't really have uh too many expectations on it, and that 10-minute clip I saw it, I was like, oh, this looks cool, but that wasn't really anything that like wanted to get me out into the theater to see it. I saw the clip of the wolf's introduction, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this looks cool. I really like that wolf introduction scene, and that clip was actually what got me to go to theaters and watch it. Um, but I didn't really have any expectations whether it was good or bad. I just didn't really have any really need or want to go and watch it in theaters. I was kind of just gonna wait till it was on streaming, but that one clip alone got me out to the theater.
And that was actually a really impressive uh, scene there. I think
Hmm.
that well, I avoided the scene because I down deep I did want to see the film. I just didn't have the uh, desire to see it in theater. I didn't want to spend the money when I didn't know what to expect from it.
Hmm.
And so it was unfortunate that things panned out the way that it did because I really do wish I could had seen it in theaters. Greetings,
Hmm.
Captain. Thank you for following over there on the Twitch side. Much appreciated. For the film's success as a whole, though, it's really tough to gauge because what is now being hailed as one of the most remarkable box office runs. Oh, let me change the scale of this. I think this will fit a lot better. There we go. Uh, one of the most remarkable box office runs of the year. I have not been able to find the articles that kind of contradicted this that I saw initially, but on social media, all these negative press releases were out, and I could not figure out if it was good or bad. And I don't know if someone was mudslinging the film, but something wasn't right. And so I was left on the fence, and it kept saying, oh, look, it's failing compared to Disney's Avatar or things like that, which makes me wonder if Disney was like, trying to drown it out with their own content. I don't know.
Hmm.
Do know they've done that sort of stuff in the past, but I felt that they were robbed of much more success if they had gotten good press immediately. If I had seen the press right away, I would have been far more enthusiastic about seeing the film. But oh well, I
Hmm.
enjoy it now, and they have definitely won my loyalty in
Hmm.
that sense. There are some pros and cons of this story, and I think that the pros way outweighed the cons. But it is worth kind of addressing some of these, what I believe to be mistakes that hindered the film's success in its early stages. But as for a pro, this film had heart. It was a remarkable difference from the first Puss in Boots to the second. The first one, which looking back on it, was really corny.
Yeah.
I know it was interesting, but it lacked everything. It
Mhm.
had like high quality textures. It was like had some beautiful fur and particle effects, but it was just flashy CG animation without the real heart and soul of the story being the main driving force for its creation. There's a reason why stories like Pixar films stood out so much, and that was because they started with a story. The animation was second. And when you come to films like Dreamworks films, they many times are doing it because they could do it. And then story was an afterthought. And it wasn't until How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda came out that whole model got turned on its head. And I suddenly realized they were here to stay. And they were actually competing. They were no longer competing for just recognition and to keep afloat. They were suddenly competing to beat the competition. And after those very successful series of How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda, and now this, I think they might actually have a real good chance of doing that. I think Disney has, in that sense, officially been dethroned because their change of focus to being about story is now here. And it is solidified. And every time that they've been making a high quality story like this, is just giving more confidence for the audience to want to invest into it.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. And the crazy thing, like comparing this movie to the first movie costed like $130 million to make or something, and this one was 90 million. So this movie was even cheaper somehow to make, even with inflation and stuff. That kind of
Mm.
blew my mind that this movie was cheaper to make, and it looks so much better. And it's like, I don't know, that's crazy to me.
Well, actually, is a very good point because unfortunately, this film suffers from, well, it's kind of the same problem. It's the same problem that was encountered with the. I'll call it a controversial film because it was not one that I liked. I know that there were people that did like it, but I did not, and it turned me off to this style as a whole. And that was Into the Spider-Verse. That art style is a cheap solution to to some of the most expensive aspects of filmmaking. When you add in these cartoon-like effects, it's actually making the whole process easier for you to animate, blend scenes together, stylize. It removes particle effect problems that you have to deal with. It limits the problems of hair and dynamics, which is very costly to a film's production. And it limits the amount of animation that it takes to actually do it. The amount of animation it takes to do a film like Ratatouille, by comparison, is astronomical compared to Into the Spider-Verse. And now, Puss in Boots. The reason why is actually relatively simple. Stand by just a second. The reason why is actually very intriguing from an animator's point of view, because Ratatouille, for example, does every animation with high quality precision. Every bit of fluid animations that take place, fur, whatnot, is being painstakingly crafted by an artist. The clothing is given to a team of artists to try and master. You have the rigs themselves are incredibly complex. This rig right here of Remy is massively intricately built. Massive amount of effort went into this. The amount of effort that goes into the characters for Puss in Boots is, how should we say, not all that good. The amount I saw behind the scenes of the rigs, and it's not something to write home about. Let me actually pull up the behind the scenes, because this was intriguing. Because when you're animating something, it's actually really important to have a lot of control for your characters. Here we go. Pre-visualization.
Starlight, Starbright.
Oh, I don't want to have your ad. Stand by just a second. And here we go. Okay. So here's some footage that came across my feed a while back. And in the animation, I saw the rigs. That right there is the big bad wolf. That rig is really simple. There is so little effort put into that by comparison to almost any other rig that I have seen. And it amazes me because the detail that they got with it was actually quite impressive. And it comes down to an aspect of 3D animation, which is finding shortcuts for your character's motions so that you limit the amount of effort that it takes. And I've actually just recently been understanding that with the animations that I've been doing for the Castrocraft channel, which is trying to do more with less. And so you have your character, you have a very simple rig in order to style and to get some dramatic stylization. And that stylization of your character helps to compensate for a lack of controls that the animator has. Just look at this scene right here. You actually will notice there is some strange, elements here. One of them is actually visible in the front right tooth. You'll notice that it's far bigger. The reason why is I think that the morphing of the character's skin was not being properly weight painted when they were creating it. So while they could get the motion, they were not refining everything to having it accurate to maintain that perfect 3D mesh that we have come to experience with films like from Pixar. So you have those problems, but you also have something else, which is textures. They have something that I've only recently started hearing, custom CEO. I don't really know what this stands for yet. I've only recently started seeing it. It gives you the ability to add more depth to something without it actually having depth. It adds sparkle effects and whatnot, and it's almost like a video game. It's like video game bling for your character. It's really easy to add in. So rather than have a whole lot of calculations that you have to worry about in your stylizing of your characters, you can just add on these basically video game assets to your characters that are really easy to process, really fast to render, and take almost no control for you. So I think that's partially why the film was so much easier for them to do. But where other films failed at that, Puss in Boots succeeded at, because they took that style and they actually made it have heart. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for making sure your story is good. Because if your story is good, everything else will start to fall into place. And Puss in Boots mastered that very well.
Yeah, I get that, especially from your perspective as someone who does like art and animation. But from my I guess noob viewer point of view, like I I enjoy the art style of it and everything, and I even enjoyed Into the Spider-Verse. I thought that movie had some heart as well. Um, but yeah, I actually enjoy the art style, especially when you compare it to the last Puss in Boots movie. Like this one is just so much more, particularly just from like you can have the sound off and it's more entertaining than the first one, just from like the way it looks, in my opinion,
And actually, that's
even without the
something.
story.
That's something also that I have really come to love about DreamWorks. So DreamWorks has mastered something. I don't even know if I'll be able to find a good image for this because I'm not going to find a good image for this because you can't really capture this very well. This film had some incredible transitions and poses. You all might remember from a few discussions ago, during the animation discussion, I actually addressed this idea that you want a moment to be frozen in your mind. You want to have something where the audience can instantly remember, oh, I remember that scene based upon this dramatic still frame. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's only a recent concept. Up until now, when people wanted to show action sequences, they just wanted to basically have more motion, have more close-ups. They didn't want to pull the camera back and have dramatic poses. DreamWorks took that whole concept and threw it out the window and said, we're going to actually make these scenes and these transitions be just as detailed and just as beautiful as the film itself, as the rest of the film. And I don't think any other company is really doing that. The first time I noticed this actually was with Kung Fu Panda, and I've not seen. It's like no other company really understands this whole concept of having these dramatic poses, memorable moments, and transitions all merged together to make it feel like it's a stage performance just taken to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, I think that DreamWorks is the master of that. And I would be curious to see what their actual process for it is, because that's actually a bit of a trade secret, you could say. Sure, you can study it and try and figure it out. Doesn't mean it's going to give you like actionable information to actually duplicate it. But it definitely makes me think that they have something that they can keep building upon as they move forward. What were some of the pros that you saw in the story? Greetings, Cappy.
I think the story itself was amazing. Had a lot of heart to it. There's moments where you're laughing, like with Perito, and then there's moments where you're sad, like when Goldilocks tells these bears pretty much that he doesn't think of them as family. Like you actually feel bad for like the bears in that moment, even though they were kind of like jokesters throughout the whole movie up until that point. Like that one scene makes you like instantly change your perspective of the bears and stuff and why they're doing what they're doing. Um, so it has like a whole range of emotions. You know, it's not just a comedy movie or a depressing movie. You get a little bit of everything. Um, the wolf, I love the wolf. I think he's awesome. And every appearance he makes, when that whistle starts, when you just hear that whistle and you see Puss's hair springing up, you're kind of like on edge with Puss. You're like, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? And I liked Kitty Softpaws as well. I think her and Puss's relationship was very interesting in the movie. Yeah, I really liked like pretty much the whole movie, to be honest. I don't have really many bad things to say about this one. There's only like one little tiny scene that I'm kind of like, yeah, that's kind of dumb, but it's whatever.
All
So
right,
not
let me
much bad to
see
say.
here. So that being said, I think that there was one. Well, I think that you're correct in that the characters of this film, including like the three bears and Goldilocks, made me care about them far more than I thought I would. I was not a fan of like Kitty Softpaws in the previous film. I felt like she was
I
kind
didn't
of
even
thrown in
remember.
there and didn't really matter all that much. Well,
Mhm.
suddenly they throw in some weight behind it and it makes it feel a little bit more normal and what's more
Mhm.
kind of fits her character. That little freaky dog. I hated the dog for most of the film. And it wasn't until the very end I actually thought that I actually had some sort of sympathy for him. And suddenly I wanted to see the dog kind of find joy and success.
I really like the dog. He's kind of the donkey, you know,
Hmm.
like when in the first movie they're like going on this adventure. Uh, I like I kind of try to when trying to explain like what this movie is. I kind of say it's the first Shrek movie where they're going on this adventure. Where in that movie it's Fiona and Shrek and Donkey getting back uh, uh, to Lord Farquaad. In this
Hmm.
movie, it's they're going to the Wishing Star. But the Wishing Star makes like this like it completely changes it from that one, and it kind of is almost like Pirates of the Caribbean, like where the bad pirates and Jack Sparrow and the Englishmen are all trying to get to the the coin in the first movie, and then you
Hmm.
see these three parties all just converge on this location by the end of the story. Uh, it's very similar to that in that sense, in my opinion. So it's pretty much the first Shrek and Pirates of the Caribbean combined it together. That's how I kind of explain this movie.
I agree. There's also something else that happened in this film that I think is probably one of the biggest contributing factors to its success. And that actually goes back to a whole concept that came out years ago that your film is only as strong as your villain.
Mm-hmm.
The worse the villain, the tougher he is to defeat, the better your film is going to do. Most animated villains have no weight. That's why they kind of will add fake weight to a story by having the Beauty and the Beast moment of where, oh no, the character's dead. Oh, the character's back to life, which has been rehashed over and over and over again. It was great for the first time, but not with each reiteration of it in different stories. This character turns that on its head. And it's like, nope, this character is going to have purpose, is going to have meaning, and it's going to transform your outlook on the characters of the story, not just the villain, but of the hero and everyone else that's around him. This character stole the story in the same way that the Joker stole the Dark Knight. Because this character was so well done, it made you actually start to become nervous for your feline hero and start to wonder if there is actually going to be some terrible consequence of this whole ordeal. And there is a consequence. It's just maybe not one that the audience is expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, this character, while very interesting and very successful for the film, this is one of the areas that I actually have one of my cons for this film. The wolf has a very intriguing voice. It's great for when you first meet him. But the moment you come to the realization of who he is, then suddenly that voice doesn't fit anymore. You need a different voice. You need his voice to change pitches. You need his wording to become more menacing and sinister. Here's an example. The character is a bit quirky to begin with. He's kind of this guy that's, he's just looking to find this Puss in Boots, and he wants to make sure to get his autograph before he collects his bounty from being dead and all. And then suddenly, when Puss in Boots discovers who he is, he needs to become someone far more menacing. And he needs to look at Puss and say nothing more other than what Puss is going to suffer. He needs to be able to look at him straight in the eyes and suddenly have the quirkiness fall away. Maybe appear in once or twice, but then go back down to the seriousness of the character as he looks the cat in the eyes and starts to tear him from the soul behind those eyes. That's the way I would approach the character. And unfortunately for us, when he is in this film, I feel like he leans too much into his quirkiness at the worst possible times. One of those is when he's describing who he is. And Puss hears this guy who is speaking in such a way that it's like, is this guy serious? Or is he just is this part of the act? It's hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Which is unfortunate, because I think that it could have become more impactful if they had limited his speech down to something with less words and more of a menacing stare. And they did that. They had a menacing stare. They had all the visuals queued up for it. The voice didn't match it, which is unfortunate, because I think they hired the actor based upon his quirkiness rather than his menacing side.
I get that. I don't know. I honestly thought he was messing from the start, but I do agree. The scene where he reveals that he's Death, he's like, "Yeah, I'm Death," and I don't mean metaphorically, rhetorically, or blah 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 blah. Like literally, I'm Death. It's just like, I think they did that though because I think it could have been like really dark and scary, especially for kid viewers. And I think they tried to lighten it up a bit with that. I think your complaints were kind of done on purpose. Even though they made him menacing pretty much in every other scene, like when he shows up in the beginning and when he just shows up at random points and like kind of haunts Puss in Boots. But that one scene where he literally says Death, I feel like they had, I bet you they had something else written, and then some studio head was like, no, this is gonna be like too scary for kids. Like we need to lighten this up a bit.
And that's possible. That's indeed possible. So there's his whistle also. While it was good in helping to give us kind of a sound for him to approach, I felt like the tune was a bit too, well, it didn't feel like it fit the character. I wish it was more of a howling sound. Like it starts out as a whistle, but then as the time goes on, it becomes more of a howl. And then it becomes something where once you hear this howl echoing in the distance, it just causes Puss's fur to come up on edge, because he knows he's trying to see both of those things coming together, and one is starting to become more prominent than the other. The whistle starts to transform, kind of how his perception of the wolf has transformed from bounty hunter to Death. I wish that the whistle would have changed to add more weight to the character, but you're probably right. It probably was done on purpose, because there's another whistle out there. Maybe you've heard about it, but there's something called a death whistle. And it was something that the Aztecs made, and it is a terrifying sound. And it's funny in a way, because it is a whistle that probably could have actually been used for the story that would have actually really messed with people, but that would have been way too much. But that being said, it was an opportunity that was kind of missed. If it was for a different story, I would have said go with the death whistle. But for this one, I would have just had it transform to a howl. But here's the thing. These are basically some of my only cons of the story. Almost everything else is like, I can understand why they took the directions that they did. I understand the quirkiness of behind characters' actions. Everything has consequences. And in that sense, whoever did the writing for this did an incredible job, because everything basically builds upon each other to making a real deep, compelling story, to the point of where characters that you don't even care about suddenly have merit. Characters that were just kind of throwaways suddenly have an impactful purpose in the story's arc. And this story, while it does have people who are, even though there are people that perish in the story, it's far less than one might have expected for a story about death. And there's a lot more just kind of slapstick that happened. And there was one scene when I suddenly realized we were dealing with something entirely different than just any generic story. And that was when Puss in Boots suddenly realizes that with his first encounter with the wolf, that he can bleed. And he's starting to panic. And then you see the drop of blood, and he reaches up and touches it, looks at it. It's like, that was a compelling moment, because not only is the character feeling scared for his own mortality, he's realizing that he's a flesh and blood creature. And to us watching a cartoon, many times that can feel it can be very hard to convey that without getting overly grotesque, like what happens in an anime. Because anime does blood all the time, but this one has a meaningful moment when suddenly the character, all he gets is nicked. And it's the nick that is just enough to really spook you into realizing that the creature that you are encountering is indeed something far more menacing than anything else Dreamworks has really given us. A character who doesn't have more or less a soul behind it. He is just there to take the souls of another. Very compelling.
That whole wolf introduction scene is honestly amazing, in my opinion. From literally the simple thing is like, "Can I get your autograph?" And he pulls out the bounty sign, and he's just like, "Right here." And he's pointing to dead. I don't know, just every little thing in that scene. It's like, "You're not living up to the legend, Gato." And he does the same spinning move that he literally used against the giant, and it doesn't even work on this wolf. And you're like, "Oh crap! Like, this is not going to go well." And seeing Puss drink the way Puss drinks milk in that scene. I don't know why, but it always cracks me up. He's like, "Retire? I'm too hot to retire." And then he just starts like pecking at the milk. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I really like that whole scene, the little bar area.
That actually raises another point about this film, is that they have something that George Lucas was always keen on. He kept saying that you want things to, if I remember the term right, he says he wants things to ring or rhyme with the other elements of a story. And so you have Luke destroying the Death Star. You have Anakin, his father, destroying the Trade Federation's command ship. These are hints of what's to come. They are reflections, so that when you see the character, you start to see that they are connected in more ways than one. George Lucas was a master of that. And in this film, they actually do something similar. They have elements where, like the giant, he defeats the giant with a very particular move. He tries to do the same move on the wolf. It fails. He tries the same move on the wolf later on in the story, and it works. And so you start to see this very interesting set of parallels that start to form, that if you're a casual viewer, you don't notice it. But the moment you start seeing it again and again, it adds more depth and detail. It makes you want to actually watch it again and again, so you can see these elements. That takes a lot of forethought. And I dare say most story writers and directors don't even want to touch it because it takes so much thought. It means that every action you have is going to have consequences. And if you're Disney, you'll just brush those consequences under the table and you'll start again from scratch. Not DreamWorks. When they have a consequence, it is heavy and it takes a toll. And so suddenly you have a character getting into even worse trouble because of an action that happened earlier in the story that you might have thought was a throwaway, or you see that there's an inevitable escalation that you can't avoid. It's so very well done in so many aspects that I am indeed kind of curious if this writing team that they have is even still there. Because if they're not, I think that they might have actually set themselves up for trouble. And that kind of moves into the next phase here, which is the problem of sequels. See, the first Puss in Boots movie was technically a sequel. Well, it's a side story to a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is a sequel to that side story of a sequel to
This
an
is a
original
sequel
story.
to a spin-off to a franchise that's been dead for 15 years.
For the most part. And they've had an animated series airing from Dreamworks. It was pretty bad as I saw like just a few parts of an episode and I could not stand it. It was a terrible animated series. The TV episodes that they did
For what?
for Puss in Boots.
Oh, I didn't know there was any TV show.
Yeah, it's not very well known and it's not very good. Dreamworks has been doing these animated series for a while, and every time they do it, it just doesn't carry any weight behind it. I'm not a fan of it in any way, shape, or form. I think it's more detrimental to the story because none of the things that happen in those series actually have consequences in the films, or very few. And they're so poorly animated, you don't really want to watch it if you're a fan of the films. Which is kind of the opposite of if you're watching an anime, because then you watch the original anime and is far better detailed, far better quality in story and music than the film itself. So here in the West, we have the opposite view. So this story shouldn't even technically have the right to be as good as it is. Because Shrek's story has been going downhill. The first film came out, sure, it was great. According to the culture, I was not a huge fan of it. Second film came out, culture loved it, but it wasn't a good sequel. And that may sound strange, but it's because it was only really successful because it latched on to cultural fads, you could say. That's what made it successful. Then Puss in Boots came along, and suddenly, we're trying to tell an original story. And it's kind of a hit or a miss. It's not a great one. And then they come out with this, and it's like, oh my, you've actually moved on from trying to do cultural references, and now you are full-blown trying to create your own world. Mm-hmm. The direction that this is taking is baffling to me. So when we think about the writers trying to come up with this stuff, where are they? What are they doing? Because it's like they're getting better, but it's just, where were they for the beginning? Now, you may find it strange I even want to bring up this point as a whole to the viewers out there. You may think that strange for even wanting to kind of address this, but the reason why is because of how the story ends. Because when it ends, we're set up for a sequel to this one. And this film had so much weight behind it. Yeah, this film had so much weight. To go back to this feels like a step backwards. And I don't know if it's going to fare well. I mean, I'm going to go see it at this point because I am so very intrigued because of how this film was made. But I feel like we're going to go back to the slapstick kind of cultural references of this story, and we're going to lose the impact, the consequences of this story. Everything that has transpired in this one to change the character, will that character still be the way that he is? Or will he revert back to who he was before, and the writers just saying, oh, well, you know what, he just had a relapse, and suddenly he's back to being the same old Puss in Boots we love. They've done that in several films, and it does not go well. A good example
I think they.
is actually Toy Story. Because, unfortunately, they have beat a dead horse over and over again with one of the most beloved characters in the story. And that is Buzz Lightyear. Buzz Lightyear, every time he is on screen now, you know he's going to revert back to the first Buzz Lightyear that we've seen. He's going to go back to, gotta defeat evil Emperor Zurg, and gotta go back to Star Command sort of character. And every single time he reverts back. Everything that transforms him is like thrown away because they know the audience wants to see the character who doesn't actually have any real connection to this world. Will Puss have the same sort of relapse? Will he go back to being the character who doesn't care about what happens to him? He laughs in the face of death sort of character, rather than how we ended, of where he actually is sober-minded. That's what I'm worried about. Did they set themselves up for failure? I don't know.
I agree. I think they set a new precedent for what to expect, because honestly, the third Shrek movie, it's so forgettable. Um, like even I'm a fan of the Shrek movies. I think the first two are awesome. But the third one, all I remember is that they're pretty much Vikings, or they're like a tribe of like ogres. I think they tried to do what you were kind of saying. They tried to create a world out of this and expand on it by building upon like the ogres in that world and them, but it just did not hit the mark at all for that movie. And then for me, Puss in Boots, the first movie, it's even more forgettable. All I remember is that the egg character is in it, and I'm pretty sure he's voiced by the guy who plays Ratatouille, if I remember correctly, or Remy in Ratatouille. And yeah, those two movies are they're very forgettable, and I think this one is a new precedent. I'd be happy to get another Shrek story if it lives up to the quality of this movie, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm curious where these writers are, because if they hired them for one story and then threw them away, we can expect the next Shrek movie to look like this.
Yeah.
It is not gonna look good. So
yeah, I mean, they better be paying those writers. They better be bringing them back. I mean, they nailed this story.
now that actually goes to something I've seen recently, which is writers in Hollywood. The cost of hiring writers now is going down. TV story writers are going up. Film writers are going way down, and we're talking a massive amount, to the point of where now it is more profitable to be working on a miniseries than to be working on a film, which doesn't look good for films as a whole, because that means that films are on the way of the dinosaur then, which, by the way, I actually prefer a miniseries over a film. I know that that's not really popular among people who are in the film world, but I like having depth and consequences to your characters. I feel like if you stay with the original story of anything, you're going to have the same hero journey. Oh, hero from nowhere. Hero's going to rise and take over, but he's got to go through these trials first. Same old story over and over again. And people complain, saying there's only like a couple of stories, 5-10 stories in the world. When you have a sequel to a sequel, or having a a side character that gets their own sequel and transforms the whole model. And suddenly you're no longer trying to tell the same old story of the hero's journey. You're actually telling a story that has consequences. You can actually put weight behind a new villain that appears. If this is the first film in the series, it's terrible. Because first off, they've met their greatest match. And that's where this character also troubles me, because I feel like this should have been a third film, not a second film. Because we needed a little bit more weight behind it. But I understand why they wanted to tell the story now. I just wish that they would have told another story in between.
Mm-hmm. I think they're gonna do some. I think they're obviously setting up for a sequel. I think they're gonna go back to Shrek, and I hope they give it a good story. And I honestly think it's gonna lead to him giving his life for either Kitty Paws or Kitty or Shrek and Donkey, like protecting either his friends or his his girlfriend or whatever they are now. I think because at the end of the movie, when Whoopi leaves, like we're gonna see each other again, and then after a scene or two later, they set it up for a sequel, and I think I think we're gonna see him. But I agree, they definitely set a high bar for them to compete with after this movie. Like
if they don't have this character return for the final film with Puss in Boots, which by the way I don't think is going to happen. I think that they're going to get cold feet and realize that there's more money in keeping the character around than letting him perish. But that actually raises the problem of sequels as a whole, and Toy Story has kind of proven this. Consequences don't exist if there is a desire for money. Now, I can agree with that, but I also see something detrimental to the story's weight. You can't tell a compelling story if you keep resurrecting a character. And when you've put this much weight behind a story, you're basically saying this character's on his way out. And he has like one last hoorah. If he squanders that, the audience is going to look back on this film and say, sure, it was a great film, but it feels like it's a different story entirely.
Mm-hmm. I honestly thought, I get what you're saying. I honestly thought he was going to die in this movie with how well they told the story. I was like, oh my gosh, the hero might actually die in this movie. Like to save his friends or Kitty or whatever. I was actually nervous for the hero in this movie. Which it's going to be hard to replicate that, honestly. They did really well at telling this. They set a very high bar for themselves that could make the next movie seem really bad in comparison, or they could live up to the standard. I hope we get 2 more movies that are with Puss in Boots, and I think the next one will probably be like a build-up to the third movie, I hope. Kind of like what they did in Pirates of the Caribbean, where the second and third movie were kind of one long story. The second movie was really building up to the third movie. And I hope they don't get cold feet, because that one line where it's like, we'll see each other again. If they just continue making stuff with him for years and years, it's gonna be like, well, that was pointless to say that. I'd honestly rather them not make another thing with him, and rather than just continue to milk the money out of him, honestly. But I do hope they fall through with him having like one last giving himself to death, really, and sacrifice, maybe just help his friends or save his friends or family. The next movie, they could take the Shrek approach, where we show up and like so much has changed. Like him and Kitty are like married and have like 10 kids, and they're all crazy, and it turns into comedy almost. which I hope they don't do. I mean, I'm fine with them starting a family or whatever, and how that could change the characters and their actions and motivations. But I do hope they give them a good ending. They set it up. They set it up with this movie for a trilogy that could end with Puss in Boots dying, in my opinion, and sacrifice for his friend family.
Now, Dreamworks is a strange company for a great many reasons. I think their biggest flaw is they are incredibly nervous about seeing things through. They have made a lot of stories. There's a lot of them also that were incredible duds, at least in terms of how I view a story. A lot of duds. I dare say for every victory they've had one, possibly two failures. At least speaking from an artistic standpoint. There are there are films that DreamWorks has made, I think most people don't even realize that they've made them because they don't know how to follow up. I don't know if they know how to follow up these days. How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda, they started off with really good stories. They had decent sequels. I think Kung Fu Panda's sequel was great. But then on their third film, everything starts to fall apart. Kung Fu Panda was not as impactful as it should have been. They kind of went halfway. How to Train Your Dragon. I personally think How to Train Your Dragon 2 should have been the final film. And 3 should have been the second film. And if they had done that, it would have made more sense. But they didn't, because I don't think that they actually know how to tell stories in a sequential order. Which kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that this film feels like it should be the ending, not the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And based upon how to Train Your Dragon went, I don't have hope that they necessarily put these films in the right order. But I'm glad they did it, because if they hadn't, would the team have actually been able to make this story otherwise? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they really had the chance to take that approach. I think they needed this movie to be one that's going to be memorable and one that's going to stick out. I don't think they could have the opportunity to just be like, yeah, this is going to be a build up to something else. Everyone's going to be like, well, why should I care about it? Like, I haven't watched a Shrek thing in 10 years. Like, why should I watch a build up for another movie? So I think they knew that they had to go out on this one. But yeah.
So DreamWorks has, well, we have to be honest. DreamWorks doesn't necessarily have the best track record compared to Disney. They've been kind of mocked, honestly, for good reason. They have failed so many times to try and tell a compelling story when Disney had them beat. This is the first time that I can really think of where DreamWorks not only competed against Disney well, but they actually beat them. Disney has not made an animated film like this in a long time. And that comes down to the other aspect of why I think this film is successful. But at the same time, hopefully it's not a flash in the pan. Because what DreamWorks did is not just make a good film. They added to a collection of stories that they've been building, and they've actually added weight to it, to the point of where it is going to actually influence their merchandise sale. This film has far bigger legs than I think can be seen in a box office. The box office, while it was good in the long run, it wasn't good at the start. And DreamWorks didn't necessarily make this film to get a massive box office. They did it to make a franchise. This is a franchise boost, like almost nothing else that DreamWorks has made in the last 5 years. This film completely rejuvenizes the whole Shrek genre. All those characters, you can bet they're going to be selling merch out of their ears. There is so much out there. I look at Puss in Boots and I think, hey, you know, if I had kids, honestly, I'd be getting them merch that was related to the story because it's good. And Universal, where they have stuff for Shrek and whatnot, it's not necessarily a big part of their merch sale. Things like this is actually going to make that merch a reality. When we look at the most successful films of all time, actually, let me pull up an image of this. Because this is a fascinating subject, and I don't think anybody has actually given this a very good very good insight into this. Okay, here we go. Turn off the dark mode for this. And move this over. All right. Here are the most successful films, highest grossing films of all time. We have Avatar, we have Avengers, Avatar, Titanic, Star Wars. You go down this list. Well, there's something that you notice. There's no DreamWorks stuff. And let's see, where's the first DreamWorks film on here? I might be missing it, but I'm not seeing it on the top 50. I thought for certain that they had something here. Maybe I'm missing it. I thought they were on here. 297. Okay, so this is the much bigger one here. That's not good. They're nowhere near the top 50, which is really bad for them when they're looking at trying to build up their franchises. When they're trying to figure out how they can defeat Disney, they need to get onto this top 50 slot, especially since Disney's been breaking the records constantly. With things like Frozen, Age of Ultron, Black Panther, Last Jedi. When you go through this list, there are so many of these that are done by Disney. For DreamWorks not to be on there is actually embarrassing. Because I would have thought for certain like Kung Fu Panda would be on there, and it's not.
What's 297?
Shrek.
First one, second one?
First one. So let's try Shrek 2. Oh, no, sorry. It's Shrek 2 that's on there. So the original Shrek is highest franchise. Okay, now here's something more interesting. Highest grossing franchises in film series. Now, this is the number that I believe they're actually going for. It's not the box office. I think it's here. Franchise and film series. Top one is Marvel. $28 billion. That's a lot. Star Wars, $10 billion. I'm actually shocked that Star Wars is this low. I thought for certain Star Wars would have them beat. Spider-Man. Spider-Man beats the Wizarding World. So you have James Bond on there. James Bond is 5. Avengers. Okay, wait a minute. Maybe that's the difference. This might include like the books and whatnot as well. It might be everything related to it. So Batman's high on there. Fast and Furious, X-Men, Jurassic Park, Middle Earth, Avatar, Transformers. Despicable Me is 15th. Pirates of the Caribbean.
Despicable Me.
Shrek is 17th. That's
Despicable
low.
Me. Despicable Me is insanely popular. That was like when I was in 3rd grade. Those Minions, like that was the talk of the town in 3rd grade. Everyone was acting like a minion in 3rd grade. But yeah.
Toy Story is 20. I thought Toy Story would be way higher than that. They are beaten by Shrek and Despicable Me. Frozen's on there. Lion King's on there. Now, Lion King doesn't surprise me, but I thought it would have still beat Frozen because of the length of time is out there. So I think this is the number that they're targeting, because merch sale is so different than anything else people really get, and merch is not going to be recorded even on here. It's not going to be recorded very well. What were we going to say, rolling chairs?
It was going to be a question about this. I was curious, because I don't understand what this thing is, to be honest, the number you're tracking. Is it just the amount of money that each movie has made, or is it including merch and books and stuff?
I believe that this is related to the film series as a whole. Merch sales are really hard to track. They do not record these things very well. And actually, when I was working at Epcot, just a second, let me get my Epcot image up here.
Yeah, merch is the big seller. I mean, George Lucas understood that. Yeah.
I don't think
the movie can make a lot.
That the merch is even, I don't think the merch is ever going to really be recorded.
Properly.
Yeah, properly, because companies don't want you to see that. When I was working at Epcot, I got to see this kind of firsthand. They were mentioning that the number one selling stuff was actually their oldest stuff. So things like Snow White were incredibly profitable. A film series that just barely really kept the studio afloat for a couple of years, and it's still keeping them afloat, you could say. They will not record that openly. Highest merch sales all time. So Star Wars by a long shot. Cars is on there, Toy Story, Harry Potter, Frozen, Transformers. It goes down fast, and Despicable Me is at the very bottom, which is kind of interesting. So it's quite the reverse.
Where's Shrek on there? Is it on there?
Shrek is not. It's not on there. But if they're trying to get onto there, this film is going to help get them there, because it will suddenly draw more interest, more eyes to it. So, as a whole, I think this film has a lot of potential moving forward, because it expands upon something far bigger than I think anyone else is really accounting for. And something the big companies know, but it's not something the average person really knows. I think that they're targeting a franchise building show. Well, that comes to really the end of what we have here. I think that this film is incredibly impactful, and I think that DreamWorks has a bright future if they can capitalize off of it. But if they don't, it's going to be detrimental to them. Rolling Chairs, any last thoughts before we end out?
Maybe it was awesome. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should see it. And yeah, really the only complaint I have with the movie is the scene where Puss breaks in to steal the map, and Kitty's sock paws is already in the chest with the map. I'm sitting there like, wait, why didn't she just steal it from the two girls? Why did she wait till Jack Horner was there? She's literally in the chest with the map. So she had to be there when the chest was open with the map. So I was obviously the whole thing happens as a creative way to get Puss in case off pauses, and then Goldie and the Three Bears, and then Horner all in the same room together. But I don't know. But you think about it, you're like, seriously, why didn't you just take the map before it even got there? She definitely could have fought the two girls who brought the map to Jack Horner in the first place. But other than that, I love the movie. I think they're setting it up for some. I think the next movie could be a make or break for this franchise. If it's good, I think it could be as popular, more popular, or it could make as much as Shrek 2, and make it as relevant as that. You know, Shrek 2, the first Shrek movie was popular, but Shrek 2 brought it to another level. I think if they nailed the next movie, it could bring it to another level as well. And I think we could get a lot of good stories out of it. Movie's good, though. Wolf is awesome. Perito, I like Perito. And Goldilocks and Three Bears, everything about it, I love it all.
All right, well, we're going to sign off for there. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Ronald.